On Tech News Today, all the president's metadata, buying stuff with Twitter, and inevitably, Google announces smart contact lenses. All that and more coming up next.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
It's Friday, January 17th, 2014, and this is Tech News Today. Tech News Today is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create your own professional website or online portfolio. For a free 2-week trial and 10% off, go to squarespace.com and use the offer code TNT1. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Mike Elgin.
I'm Sarah Lane.
And Tech News Today explores the top tech news in 30 minutes or less. Well, President Obama made his big speech, and today he called for moderate changes to how the National Security Agency conducts electronic surveillance. His changes amount to a laundry list of actions that make some concessions to each major group of critics. For example, he called for bans on spying on America's closest allies. Sounds like a pretty good idea. Effective immediately, the NSA now needs approval from a court to gain access to metadata harvested through the many NSA programs exposed in the Edward Snowden revelations. Metadata will still be collected, but possession will remain in the hands of someone else. Obama will ask the U.S. Attorney General, intelligence community, and Congress to decide exactly who's going to take control of the data. In a nod to the tech industry, Obama said companies would be allowed to share more information with the public about government requests for data. Well, joining us today to talk about the president's speech is Richie Jennings, an analyst and consultant specializing in security and related topics. He writes for ComputerWorld.com and other publications, and although he's based in England, he's joining us this morning from Silicon Valley. Welcome, Richie.
Hey, Mike. Nice to be here.
So the big questions are, is this going to fix everything, and will everybody be happy?
Oh, yeah. Next question. I love the way you called it moderate changes. That has to be the understatement of the century. We heard an awful lot about telephone metadata, phone call metadata, and precious little about data collection from internet connectivity. It's the usual misdirection that we're seeing from politicians on both sides of the Atlantic.
That's a good point. And one of the items that we didn't mention in our opening comments was that Obama reduced the degree of separation between an actual suspect from 3 contacts to 2. For example, you can look into the actual suspected terrorist. You can look into the person the suspected terrorist called, but you can't look into the people that they called. And I don't recall anybody really being super upset about that. It seems to be kind of an odd change that kind of goes against the end.
That one completely came out of left field. So yeah, so if you've got a known or suspected terrorist who calls Alice, and Alice calls Bob, and Bob calls Charlie, up until today, you'd be able to investigate who this Charlie person is. Right now, and then now after this changes, oh no, well, we're not allowed to investigate Charlie, but Bob could be still a person of interest. Yeah, okay, that's all very well, that's interesting. But again, we're talking about telephone metadata. And I don't know if you know any terrorists, and I'll say for the record that I don't, knowingly, but do they use telephones these days, these terrorists? I'm thinking not. I don't see how telephone metadata is relevant to the broader discussion that the industry is having and has been having now for however many months this has been going on.
As I'd like to point out whenever we talk about these kinds of things, they're not actually doing law enforcement. They're doing pre-crime. They're trying to prevent terrorist attacks before they happen. And so they're applying big data to metadata to try to just figure out little things like, you know, where somebody was when they called, and what time they called and how often they called. If you recall from Zero Dark 30, one of the big plot twists in that was they figured out that somebody was associated with Osama bin Laden because of the weird pattern he used to call his mother. And so that's something that wouldn't be direct evidence, but it's the kind of phishing expedition that the NSA is apparently really interested in, and it will clearly be able to continue doing. There'll just be an additional step of going through the FISA court, and who knows if they'll even really comply with that. I'm not sure what the oversight is to make sure that they comply with these rules. I'd be interested in those kinds of details. Well, it was really light on details, I guess is the problem.
Very, very much so. I mean, Mike, lest we forget, and Mr. Obama helpfully reminded us of this, we asked them to do this 12 years ago, nearly getting on for 13, right? Yeah. Post 9/11, it was identified, well, several failings were identified where agencies weren't talking to each other and they should have been, and that there were data available to those agencies that could have theoretically help them foil the plot before it happened. Hindsight's always 20/20, but nevertheless we asked them to do this. And you put your finger right on it. This is more about oversight, or it should be more about oversight than about what the capabilities are and what they're allowed to collect and what they're not allowed to collect and where they're allowed to store it. When there are uncorroborated but stories that NSA operatives are stalking their ex-girlfriends using the facilities that have been given to them by these secret courts, then you have to take a pause and say, something's not right here, but that doesn't mean that the underlying data collection is necessarily a problem.
Sure,
it's about oversight.
Sure, and Obama is trying to deal with the criticism he's gotten from many different quarters, and it's easy to divide up where that criticism is coming from. Within the United States, there are constitutional issues that he has to contend with, and I think that he's always trying to sort of sweep those under the rug to a certain extent. But internationally, the rest of the world is not protected by the U.S. Constitution. How is this news going to be received in Europe? You live in England and throughout Europe and throughout the rest of the world. Are they going to believe and trust that this is going to provide the kinds of safeguards they're looking for?
I mean, I speak as a citizen or as a subject, I suppose, of one of the other Five Eyes nations. And, our equivalent of the NSA, GCHQ, is doing exactly the same sort of thing and is working in close cooperation with the NSA guys. There was nothing that hinted in Mr. Obama's speech that there was going to be any change in the behavior of the other Four Eyes in the cooperative group. It will be interesting to see if there will be similar speeches made by other heads of state from nations who are known to cooperate.
Well, presumably the UK, Germany, and a few others are among the elite group who now will not be spied upon with their personal cell phones and so on. So
unless there's a good reason to, is what I heard.
Yes, that's right. And whose reason, and how will we know, et cetera. Well, Richie, thank you so much for joining us. You can find Richie at richiej.com, and you can also find his column on computerworld.com. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Mike. Always a pleasure.
It's an interesting side note that the speech today was made on the anniversary of President Dwight Eisenhower's 1961 speech about the military-industrial complex. And President Obama said that the date was purely coincidental. Well, coming up, we're going to tell you why you soon may send tweets instead of using your credit card. But first, I want to tell you about Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it easy to create your own professional site or online portfolio. When you're on the internet, you will be judged. If you have a company with a website, or you're trying to sell a book, or you have a blog, or any sort of online presence, when anybody goes to that site, they're going to make all kinds of judgments about you and your company and your product and your organization based on what they see. If it looks amateurish, they'll think that you are amateurish. If it looks insecure or it has bad performance, that will reflect on what it is you're trying to communicate. So make sure you have an awesome website, and you can do that with Squarespace.com. It's awesome because there are 20 beautiful design templates, more than 20, will make your website look super beautiful and professionally and elegantly designed. And that, again, will reflect well on you. It'll have fantastic performance. You basically can't bring down Squarespace site, because they throw instantly and automatically throw all kinds of power behind it if it starts being hit by lots of traffic. And so everything about Squarespace, from the tools on the back end to the design templates to the performance to the service, will result in a website, in your website, looking incredible, and everyone will judge you as an incredible service, person, blog, or whatever it is that you're doing. Best of all, Squarespace is mobile ready in multiple ways. They have a Squarespace metric app for iPhone and iPad that lets you check site stats like page views, unique visitors, and social media follows. And with the blog app, you can make text changes, tap and drag images, you can change layouts and monitor comments on the go. Fantastic to be able to monitor your comments and moderate your comments no matter where you are. So start a free 2-week trial with no credit card required and start building your website. When you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure you use the offer code TNT1, one for the month of January, to get 10% off and to show your support for Tech News Today. We thank Squarespace for their support of Tech News Today. And remember, Squarespace is everything you need to create an exceptional website. Well, Sarah, can I stop using my credit card now, or what's going on?
Well, you probably want to hold on to your credit card for the immediate future. But if you need to buy something, you might be able to tweet your cash pretty soon. Recode is reporting that Twitter's in its final stages of a partnership with the payment service Stripe to enable retailers to accept credit cards through tweets. Now, this is according to an anonymous source, and both Stripe's spokeswoman Kelly Slims and Twitter spokesman Will Stickney declined to comment. That said, Recode obviously has some good sources. They know people familiar with matters, and there are some clues that point to Twitter wanting to do something like this. One of those is back in August, Twitter had hired Ticketmaster CEO Nathan Hubbard to run commerce for the company. Last February, Twitter started letting American Express cardholders use Twitter to buy specific products if they linked the two accounts together. They have a similar deal with Starbucks rewards cards. If you sync your Starbucks account to Twitter before tweeting at a specific Twitter account, you can buy a friend a gift card from Starbucks, for example. Now, sources also say that tweeting to send money to others is a product that's sort of been tested internally. It's kind of, people have gotten interested in it, and then the project has sort of stalled, but it's not something that has just come up out of nowhere. Also, if you think about, well, why would they go with Stripe rather than one of the other companies? Stripe lets companies accept payments on websites and mobile apps through their API. They have some big names that are already their customers: Lyft, the car ride sharing program, and also Shopify, Instacart, which is a grocery delivery service. So it's definitely a tested model. I guess my question is, well, I mean, public tweeting of amounts doesn't sound like something that Twitter wants to get in the business of doing. Remember Blippy a few years ago? It's just kind of an odd thing. However, we do know that Twitter seems to be taking the whole DM thing more seriously. And I think that this is a perfect example of something that you would want to be doing sort of out of the normal feed, a person-to-person type of transaction.
Exactly.
And it's not out of the realm of possibility.
No, it isn't. And in fact, I spent some time in Kenya, as we talked about on a previous show last year. This time last year, in fact, I was living in Nairobi. And it's a little-known fact in the United States that literally half the world's transactions happen through Kenya's mobile transaction service. And all of that is SMS-based. Mm-hmm. So SMS is even more insecure, I believe, than Twitter. And yet they make it work.
Well, Twitter started as SMS, actually.
Exactly. It was a SMS-based service. And so this can work theoretically. The other interesting thing is that the authors in that article speculated that Twitter could integrate Skype's payment processing into its cards, essentially, so that the entire transaction could take place within the, presumably direct DM card. This reminds me of what Google's trying to do with Google+. They have something called interactive posts, and they're trying to get companies to do all kinds of actions that happen within the card, within the post, and one of them is transactions, where you'll be able to buy things. And I think, of course, Facebook will come along with this. I think we're looking at a future next year, the year after, where all the major social networks will enable you to see things, buy an impulse buy, right there. Mm-hmm. And, this isn't a thing where here's my credit card number, I'm sending it over Twitter. It's more like you have to verify your identity, and the payment processing and the actual data is held offsite somewhere else. I'm sure it's going to happen. It's great to see them finally, if the report is true, getting around to it. I think it's a great idea. Just be able to tweet somebody some money.
Well, yeah, being able to send payment virtually is something I do all the time. I have a variety of options on my smartphone. Square, Venmo, PayPal, Google Wallet as well. So it seems a little left field when you think about it. Twitter for sending money, but if you think about money as a transaction as really a form of communication. Hey, hi Mike, how are you doing today? Hey Mike, I owe you $5. Here it is. It starts to make more sense, especially when Twitter is not just, hey world, this is what I am doing today, let me update you, but there's a back channel of conversations that are happening on Twitter all the time. And the fact that they're taking the direct message sort of out of burial, where it's been, at least on the web version of Twitter, where you kind of have to go find it in order to send a direct message to somebody, shows me that they want to make more use out of this kind of secret conversation part of Twitter. Yeah,
I think you're absolutely right about that. Well, after Google's smart glasses, what's next? Smart contact lenses? We learned yesterday that the answer is yes. Google announced that the company's Google X Lab is testing contact lenses that help people with diabetes monitor blood sugar levels in their eyes. The lenses contain tiny electronics and an antenna thinner than a human hair, and it can wirelessly transmit readings to a nearby device. With us today to talk about all this is Frederic Lardinois, who wrote an excellent piece for TechCrunch about Google's announcement. In addition to writing for TechCrunch, he runs Silicon Filter, which he founded. Welcome, Frederic.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit more about these contact lenses and what Google announced yesterday.
Well, it's not Google Glass in your contact lens, right? The idea here is that you can measure blood glucose. So it's really interesting for diabetics. This kind of product has been around for a while. That's something I wrote about yesterday. But Google X is now working on this as well. And Google being Google, they're the kind of company that can actually make this happen. So it's comes out of left field. Nobody really expected this, but it's essentially what you described. It's a contact lens with a bunch of sensors in it and a little antenna that can transmit data wirelessly.
Sometimes I get the feeling that Google X Labs and probably some of the other companies that have labs have to sort of let their researchers, whom they often poach from universities, do their pet projects, a kind of 20% time, 80% on Google Glass, 20% on contact lenses, things like that. And this could be one of those kinds of things. I really don't get the feeling that this is about diabetes. I don't think a bunch of researchers set out to say, how can we help diabetics monitor things? I think they started out saying, we think it's possible to embed electronics and sensors inside contact lenses. What is an application we might be able to do? So I would imagine, and again, I don't know enough about the research to really speculate, other than the knowledge that there's another organization that's working on, a Swiss company called Sensimed, that's working on a test in contact lenses for glaucoma. That it's really about putting electronics and sensors into contact lenses, and let's see what kind of electronics and sensors are possible.
Well, sure. Google is riding the wearables wave with this, right? They know this is a big deal. People are interested in it. The two researchers who did this, Brian Otis and Babak Parvitz, I think they are. They used to be at the University of Washington, and they actually worked with Microsoft back in the day on something very similar. Then they moved to Google kind of quietly a couple of years ago and worked on Google Glass there. So they've been doing this for a while. It doesn't seem to me like this is not something you can do as a 20% project, right? This is something you got to put some time and energy in, and there's more than two people involved here. But it's definitely one of those projects that makes Google look very good. There's a reason they're doing something like this. It's something that makes all of us speculate what's going to come for Google Glass very soon, because both of these guys were supposed to be working on Google Glass officially, but now we know they were doing something else. But yeah. Just interesting, that Google is doing something like this and making it public right now.
Well, thank you for joining us, Frederic. You can find Frederic at siliconfilter.com. And again, thank you for illuminating this really out of left field research and announcement by Google.
Thanks for having me.
Well, and speaking of Google Glass, Sarah, I hear we have some news in that realm.
Yeah, let's cue up Peter Tosh, because if you're driving while wearing Google Glass in the state of California, we say legalize it. Get it? At least for now, anyway. If you missed Jason's report on our evening show, Tech News Tonight, Cecilia Abadi, who was ticketed in October for speeding and also for wearing Google Glass, it was the first known ticket anyone had ever heard of, was found not guilty by a San Diego traffic commissioner. The law she was ticketed for covers video screens in general, but not smart glasses in particular. That same law specifies police have to prove that the screen was actually in operation while driving, and they couldn't prove it, so she walked. She was also found not guilty of speeding, so she just got to walk
She had
in general.
a fantastic day.
She's like, not only was I not being unsafe, but I wasn't even going over the speed limit. So, okay, so I think the first question is, you've got Google Glass screens. They're very small. They turn on and off very easily. How in the heck would any law enforcement officer be able to tell that it was just on? I mean, would we be looking at usage logs? Is this something that then turns into like a, searching my vehicle? Let me see those glasses. Let me download your, your transcript of what you've been doing, and that's exactly when I pulled you over. This gets very complicated.
It really does, because to prove it would require, I guess, the things you mentioned, plus maybe a photograph or something. I just can't imagine how the screen on a Google Glass is absolutely minuscule, and in a moving car in the middle of the day, there's just no way you could tell, as far as I know. It's also, this ruling doesn't solve anything, and it doesn't answer the question, are smart glasses safe behind the wheel? Google Glass, all the electronics are above and to the right where your eye are. There are alternatives to Google Glass coming out this year where the screen is actually right in front of your eyes. You see right through the screen. And so, is Google Glass safe, but those other devices unsafe? All of this stuff has been completely, has not been settled about whether these are safe, whether they should be allowed or legal. I mean, my feeling is that it has to be taken on a case-by-case basis, and as usual, the law is miles and miles behind.
Well, and in the case of Delaware, New Jersey, West Virginia, who've all introduced bills that would ban driving with Google Glass, it's one of these, we don't really understand how it works yet, so let's be, safe rather than sorry. And that's not necessarily the right answer, but that's a very knee-jerk governmental reaction.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, is it too late for any new operating system to challenge the Apple iOS or Google's Android? The Chinese Academy of Sciences unveiled their COS, which stands for China Operating System. It's a Linux-based OS, and according to one Chinese software company, it's, quote, intended to break the foreign monopoly in the field of infrastructure software, unquote. The announcement was mocked on Chinese social media and on YouTube as a bad copy of Android, and it's expected to be rejected by users according to several reports. Meanwhile, Samsung lost a major partner in its big rollout of the Tizen operating system, which is expected in March. Japan's giant telecom, NTT Docomo, announced today that it won't launch any phones running Tizen this year. So, Sarah, I mean, has the train already left the station? Is it too late for any third operating system, including Windows Phone, Firefox OS, Ubuntu, Sailfish, any of these new, mostly Linux-based operating systems? Are they just wasting their time?
No, I don't think so at all. I think the fact that you say, okay, well, it's somewhat of a two-horse race. So you've got iOS and you've got Android, and none of the other operating systems seem to be making a dent in the global market, to me says that none of those other operating systems are good enough to make enough of a dent in the global market. Now, I'm not specifically pointing out Windows Phone is really bad or, BlackBerry is over, but that's just, if the consumers don't want it, that they don't want it. The Chinese market is huge. Android flourishes there, but that's because, in large part, there are Android devices that are just more affordable. And so that is the operating system that's kind of run away with the market. It absolutely doesn't mean that that's just the best one. It's just it's been the best solution until now.
Right, and one of the big issues that has to be mentioned is apps. A lot of consumers do, and all consumers should consider the app ecosystem when choosing a phone. BlackBerry tried to make their platform compatible with Android apps to a certain extent, and that hasn't been super successful for them. I just don't know how these operating systems are going to succeed. It's a tall order for anyone trying to compete with iOS and especially Android. It's got to be very, very difficult at this point. Well,
I'll just say this really quickly.
Okay.
They said that about Android too.
That's true.
How is Android gonna? It's so far behind, and Android has become a behemoth of an operating system, the mobile one. So things change a lot in just a couple of years.
That's a great point. That's a great point. So we told you about the ordeal of Cecilia Abedi, who was ticketed for wearing Google Glass behind the wheel and who was found not guilty yesterday in a hearing. Well, her Google Plus profile has some nice visuals to go with the story. For example, her banner profile is taken, you guessed it, with Google Glass from behind the wheel while she's driving through an intersection. Pretty hilarious, and I think to a certain extent that's kind of evidence that she's got the screen on while she's driving.
Well, maybe. That's a green light. I don't know, Cecilia. Playing with fire.
I'm not a judge, and I'm not going to judge. The best item on her feed, though, is that when she emerged from court to face a bevy of reporters, most of whom had their video cameras trained on her, she was recording them. She captured the whole thing through Google Glass and posted the video on Google Plus for all to see, of fantastic use and an ironic use of Google Glass, and we applaud her.
I feel like we need some, I don't know. It makes me a little nauseous watching this.
It is very nauseating. You know, Cecilia, they do have motion stabilization filters on YouTube. Check it out.
Yeah, there's an app for that, isn't there? I hope there is.
There absolutely is.
All right, if you thought your home theater was pretty high-end, you really haven't seen anything yet. I know it's one of these internet lists, but it's kind of worth it. Homesandhues.com is showcasing 11 amazing Geek home theaters that will easily put whatever speakers that you've arranged in your own theater cave to shame. We got an Indiana Jones room. You got a Pirates of the Caribbean den. My favorite, though, I mean, look at it's ridiculous. Not just that it's a home theater, but all of the stuff that they put into it. My favorite one is the Titanic room, though, because nothing says movie night like a home theater decorated like a death boat.
You know, most of those are pretty tacky, except for the King Kong chairs.
Yeah.
Those are beautiful.
Those are the worst ones.
Those are fantastic.
I kind of like the Pirates of the Caribbean one. I'm not sure about some of these.
I think you can swing from the mast in that into your chair.
Hey, you got to get props for going all the way. What happens when you kind of have a new favorite movie, though? Bring in the decorator and start over?
That's right. That's right. Well, that's our show. We thank you for joining us. Send your news tips to our email address at tnt@twit.tv or call 260-TNT-SHOW and leave a message. Also, upvote the stories you'd like to see us cover on our subreddit at technewstoday.reddit.com and visit our Tech News Today Google Plus community. You'll find our website at twit.tv/TNT. And check out our brand new show, Tech News Tonight, which airs weekdays at 4 p.m. Pacific, and make sure you subscribe to that one. I'd like to thank our guests, Richie Jennings and Frederic Lardinois, for joining us today, and thank you for tuning in. We'll see you Monday.